Hey, you guys. So I have a big confession to make. I'm going to talk about something a little weird out of my wheelhouse today. If you don't know who I am, I'm Suzanne Tinkemeyer. I used to write for Pathos, a column called No Longer Quivering, and it involved evangelical, fundamentalist type religion and the crazy places that can go. I still write about that occasionally. I sometimes talk about that, and that is leading me to talk about my subject today. First, let me say, don't bully anybody I'm going to talk about here. Don't throw shade. It just is what it is. Um, okay, so this comes out of fundamentalism for me. It also comes out of my childhood. When I was 3, I saw I don't know if it was a Union or I think it was a Southern soldier. I saw a soldier one night from my bedroom window, an old-fashioned gray Civil War outfit with a sword. And at the time, I was too young to even know what it was I was seeing, and that this would continue on. And over time, even the church would try to explain it. Did KJ have a Zoom meeting yesterday with the court at 7 a.m.? Number one fan, yes, she did. I don't know anything more than that. I know there was a moderator brought in. That's all. That's all I know. I don't know if anybody actually attended the meeting or were allowed to. I'm waiting to hear. So I'm talking about the paranormal today. So, like I said, for me, it started when I was 3 years old, and it's just continued on. I've had people on both sides, atheist and Christian, tell me it's demonic to see dead people, but it is what it is for me. It's something that's just a natural part of my life. Here, I'm seeing a lot less, and I thought about that a while, and I said, I think it's because people here tend to keep very short lists of offenses. It's not demonic and it's not hallucinations. Well, thanks. Thanks for saying that, Reverend. I yeah, I've been debating whether to talk about this or not for quite a long time. But just know that this has happened again and again and again for me through the years. And one thing I started doing when I got in my 40s was I started keeping track of these things. So every time I would see a dead person, they would tell me something about themselves. I would see if I could link it up with somebody, an actual person. Example, we stayed in a hotel one time near Bluefield, West Virginia, and I had somebody appear in the middle of the night and they told me they'd been stabbed in the parking lot in a bar fight and who it was that, hey, autistic show. They showed me who it was that did it. The next day, I researched that before we left, and sure enough, he was buried at the graveyard right next door to the hotel. Yes, he'd been stabbed to death in a barroom fight. No, they hadn't figured out who had done it yet. So I fired off an email to the family afterwards and said, hey, I know this is weird. I know it sounds like I'm ready for the loony bin, but this is kind of how it's going. This is what I saw. This is what I heard. One time we were at a friend's new house and the former owner appeared to me and was very upset because the family was redoing everything in the house. She did not like the fact they were painting over her peach colored paint. She was livid about the kitchen remodel, angry about so many different things. And that's one thing I've learned from some of my interactions. It's possible to get stuck here on Earth, stuck with petty resentments and things. So I figured out with Costa Ricans, they take care of business. There's not a whole lot of resentment or things left, not a lot of unfinished business. So that's why I think that I'm not seeing I'm not seeing the dead here. I've only seen the dead once since I got to Costa Rica. And that was when my dear friend Nigel appeared at the foot of my bed, very upset right after he died, to ask me to tell somebody that he didn't hate him. And I said, I've already told him that, Nigel. I know you didn't hate him. I knew you well enough to know what your thoughts were on this. And that was kind of strange. Most of the time, it's people I've never met before. Um, Sometimes it's horrific and unexpected. Like the first time I went to Galveston, I was on the beach. I was seeing dead people washing up in the beach. And I know I was looking at the hurricane that they had around the turn of the century. So when I started getting people I knew, I think Americans in general tend to keep grievances going longer than they should and are not easily satisfied with a lot of good things in life. Fulham, I believe that's so. I believe that's why. I believe that's why there's people left and right. And here, there's not a whole lot of traumatic deaths except for some auto accidents. People here have a better quality of life. They're more satisfied, even if they don't have a lot of money. And I think all of that plays into why Americans are doing this and maybe not other cultures. Um, there's a lot that I don't know about all this, and I'm sure. And it's kind of funny because for years I did have one of the electrical energy measuring devices, and some of the things, some of the paranormal type equipment to investigate. So for a long time, and still to this day, when I have one of these interactions, I write it down in my notebook. I write down what happened, what they said, and I try to verify it by doing a ton of research. And most of the time I can. And that's been the crazy thing. Where this really got crazy for me was when I was part of my Quiverful church towards the end, when they were embracing all kinds of different weird theologies. My pastor knew that this is something that I had an ability for. That this is something that I had an ability for. And so when they would go to do a house cleansing or something, I'd get asked every time, "Hey, greenworm." So I would do all this weird stuff. And at the time, it was like, hooray, the church is embracing what I can bring. But now I'm looking back and seeing it's just another case of them using what they thought they had. Unfinished business is the main reason the dead stay around, and those that honor their dead instead of even hold on to grudges after death tend to release it better. Yeah, and Rev Ruin, I think that's true. Some cultures do not believe in hanging on to those things. Uh, yeah, yeah. So that's why they hang around. So this should be interesting because sometimes when I go to these places, these things manifest. That's why I use a picture of the Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. I generally don't seek this stuff out. It finds me. It always has. It probably always will. And that's okay. If I can help somebody, if I can help them deal with their unfinished business so they can move on, it's all well and good. Um, very few times if I had to say, no, I will not help you, like to the lady who was angry about the house. It's like, you're dead, move on. This is not your house. And there are some prayers and things you can do to move people along. And I usually do that. Recently, I found a YouTuber that all he does is paranormal. And the way he does it releases people, I really like. He doesn't provoke. These ghost shows and things where people are provoking and they have all these sophisticated equipment, just chat my rear end because I think that they're not doing anything good. They may be dicing with something they don't fully understand. It's like I saw them one time on one show. They were using a Ouija board. Let me tell you, do not use a Ouija board. Do not. I'm not saying that you can't talk to your beloved grandma that way. You probably can, but the thing that's so dangerous about Ouija boards is you open a hole in the spiritual realm that anything can come through. And I've heard too many stories from people I know who have had really bad things come through. My parents tried to give me one when I was 12 as a Christmas present. It was one of many things. And I didn't even know about the thing, but I was frightened of it. I kept it in the closet of the spare bedroom. I wouldn't even let it in my space because as a child, even I picked up on that. So there's that. I'd be interested in hearing if any of you had those kind of experiences. I know that for me, that's why I can't completely rule out the existence of God because there's so many of these things that I've experienced that tell me there's something after life. Exactly what that something after life looks like, I think is probably vastly different than most people who are evangelical Christians believe. That they believe in something that I don't think exists. So I'm going to go with the things that I know exist in my heart. And sometimes it was really comical. Like one time for a long time, I worked off and on part-time for a quilt shop in Virginia. And it was in an old church, a church that had been built back in the 1700s. And there was a building right next to the church that had been the county tuberculosis house where they put everybody who had tuberculosis. And Ouija's are freaky. Yeah, you can open a door and whatever comes through can pretend to be what you want. Exactly. That's the problem, Reverend. I've never liked it when they yell at ghosts. They're lost and needing help. No wonder some ghosts are violent. Exactly. I don't think they should be doing that either. We received a board and we had several bad things happen. It stopped once you destroyed the board. Yep. You have to destroy those stupid things, because if you don't destroy them, they somehow come back. I've seen that happen too. So working in the quilting store in this church that had been built in the 1700s was really crazy, because I would be in there by myself, maybe dusting and putting up stock or whatever. The next thing I hear hymns coming from the choir loft, and I would just laugh, knowing I was hearing some kind of echo from the past that was showing me. And there was something in there that liked to open the doors, just like to open the doors. You'd be in there doing something and all the doors would flip open. Spirits, ghosts, yeah, you don't have to yell. No, you don't have to yell. I've always been seeing with spirits and things like ghosts, but even as a Pentecost, never yelled at spirits. Yep. So the good reverend would show up and open all the doors, and I get a kick out of that. And a couple times when I was very late, I would see things manifest in the old tuberculosis house, and I know they could not keep a tenant in there for anything. It also dated back to the 1700s. This is a very old city that I was working in. The only time I've ever sought out to look at the spiritual and supernatural was going to the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in Weston, West Virginia. We went for a weekend. I told my husband, let's go here. Let's go to the Flindration Tunnel. Let's go here. And it was kind of freaky because it's a huge building. It's the second largest freestanding limestone building in the world. And limestone is thought to conduct spiritual energy big time. So we got there and it was closed that day. I didn't know they closed on Mondays, and it was a federal holiday. So we were out and about in West Virginia. And it was kind of strange. So we walked all the way around the building, this huge ass building, and there were all kinds of outbuildings. And when we got to the building where the children were, you could hear them. You could hear the children, and you could see there was a ball that was moving around up on the playground up top. Well, it was kind of funny. My husband split immediately and went back to the car. He says, had enough. That was my only encounter there. But it was enough to tell me that building is probably full of trapped spirits that need help leaving. Oh, it's so sad to think about those children up there forever. But it's a fascinating place. If you ever get a chance to be in that part of the world, I highly recommend it. They're getting ready to reopen in April to tours. It's still on my list when I go back. That and the boat graveyard in Maryland is the thing I want to see this time when I go back to that part of the world again. So that's it. I love haunted locations. I do too, Reverend. I really do. And it's sometimes, if you're prepared and you go, it works. Your uncle was in there at 12? Oh my goodness. I can't even imagine. From what I've seen and heard, it looks like it was definitely not what I would call a very nice place to go. Not at all. And yeah, I just can't hardly imagine that. One of the things I did while I was there was walk through the graveyard. Talk about spooky. There's an old asylum in Newberry in Michigan. I want to check that place out. I had put that on my list too, because my husband goes up to where he was raised, East Lansing, Michigan. And I'm always looking for something new to do in Michigan. I was a tuberculosis nurse and was sent to a training in an old tuberculosis hospital. I was given a room in one of the former hospital rooms. Talk about 3 restless nights. I was happy to leave. I bet you were. I bet you were. Now, like I said, I've seen that too. And one of the places I've gone that in Louisiana that I've had a lot of sightings at is one of the old plantations. One of the old plantations, and it escapes me now. Not Rosedown. Maybe it was Rosedown. No, not Rosedown. Not Rosedown. I had no experiences there. But there's another one near St. Francisville, Louisiana, that is notorious for having ghosts. And I've been there and seen things. It's pretty crazy. And I've spent the night there before. And you're right, a real restless night. Upper Peninsula. I know what the Upper Peninsula is like. My husband went there on his last trip to Michigan up to the Upper Peninsula because he had spent his summers, at least one summer, working at a resort in the Upper Peninsula called Boyle Highlands, something like that. And he went up there to revisit his old stomping grounds. You live in the Upper, oh, okay, Rev, that I know where you live, and you live near the craziest person I know, in Michigan. I believe that some of us are more sensitive feeling experience. I think so. I really do. And it's not something that I want to do. Most of the time I've had it happen to me, they just show up. The shocking thing for me is in the last 10 years, I've had people I know show up. And that's been a little disconcerting every time it happens. When my friend Nigel showed up, it was very bizarre. I had just talked to him 2 weeks before he died. And he kept saying to me, what will happen when I die to my dog? Because he had a really, I'm not going to say vicious, because that's really not what it was. He was very protective, and he'd been through significant abuse. He was a rescue dog. He kept asking me, what will happen? What will happen? And I kept saying, well, Nigel, I think your dog will know that people coming to help you are coming to help you and let them in. Sure enough, he died 2 weeks later, and his dog did let the people in to take him out. It was really tragic, very tragic death for me, because it was one of my really close friends that I talked to on the phone a couple times a week, usually. Oh, Silly Rabbit, thank you so much. Thank you. My yarn fund thanks you a great deal. I'm getting ready to buy a whole pile and have it shipped here, and that will go a long way towards it. So I guess what I'm trying to say is be sensitive to that stuff. I think everybody has a potential. Oh, Silly Rabbit, thank you so much. I can't even begin to say how much I appreciate that. Be sensitive to these things. I think all of us have that ability, but I think some of us turn it off. I recently had a conversation with a dear friend of mine who is an atheist who started telling me, well, once you become more educated, you will see that your belief in ghosts is childish. And I've been getting this for years. I'm saying, once you find out, you'll know it's childish and it's all your mind making it up. I don't think so. Because my experiences have been so consistent through the years. And it's always somebody looking for help. It's never somebody just showing up to show up. It's always like, can you help me? Yes, my cat kept coming back. Thought I was going crazy. This dog heard her meow after. Had to ask her to go to the Rainbow Bridge. Never heard her again. Call me crazy. Green worm. That was the other part I wanted to talk about. I have had an exotic bird die that came back, and I have had a cat that came back. And they're very different. Every now and then the cockatiel would come back. Not very often. We'd hear him. He'd be shuffling around near where the cage was. You hear his distinctive little feet running. He would get on this lamp he used to get on and tap. He'd be tapping away. And we'd hear him and say, Oh, it's Elvis because his name was Elvis. And just laugh because it was so funny. And I believe that was him coming back because that was the only explanation I could make for some things that were happening. The other one was so sad. It was my little bit, my cat that I had. We rescued him. He was over 10 years old. One of our neighbors moved and abandoned him, abandoned the poor little thing. And he was crying. He came out, he was so skinny. He was over 10 years old. The vet said, well, he's got this and this wrong with him. Oh, you bought expensive yard. I'm going to be doing the same here very shortly. Autistic. So the little cat, what happened is, like I said, we rescued him. He was so skinny. Our neighbors abandoned him. And he turned out to be the best little buddy there ever was. Of all my cats I've ever had, oh, thank you so much, silly rabbit. Of all the cats I've ever had, he was the best. He just was. He followed me around all the time. He had the cutest little cat paths around the house. When I go out gardening, he'd be by my side. While I was cooking, he'd be by my side. When I would sit down to crochet, he would sit on the back of the sofa and put his front half on my shoulder and purr in my ear while I was crocheting. So he was just precious. And we had him over 10 years. He died of cancer. I had to have him put down because at the end he was just so sick and he was suffering horribly. So it was like, no, you're going to have to go across the Rainbow Bridge. I was so sad when he died. He was the saddest of all my cats dying because he was the most loving. When I would foster kittens, he would take care of them. He would groom them and just love on them and stuff. So he was just a special, special little guy. So I had him put down. And the morning after I had him put down, he came back to say goodbye. And it was interesting. I bet she did. That they get in your heart. They get in your heart and you end up really loving them. So the very next morning, I'm sleeping in my bed and I feel pressure on my head and a lot of purring. Well, a little bit used to get on my head every morning around 4 or 5 in the morning, and he would be on my head just purring away, and I would wake up to this. I went to reach up, and there was nothing there. Later that day, when I was crying and upset over this, I went out to garden, and when I came back, I took off my earphones and put my iPod down. That's how long ago this was. And the iPad, I turned it off and locked it, and it kept turning on. It kept turning on, turning on, turning on, and kept flipping to this one song over and over again. And it was a Christian song by an artist named Peter Furler. And it kept flipping on to this part about being on the other side. It's a new name, new clothes. Every teardrop is wiped away. And I can't tell you how incredibly, incredibly happy I was to see that. He was telling us he was okay. So I had a little conversation with him and said, you got to go across. We love you very much, but you have to cross the Rainbow Bridge. Thank you for telling me you're okay, because that's what I took that to mean. That he was there and he was okay on the other side. And sure enough, he never showed up again. So yeah, that was a pretty crazy time and a very sad one. It was so sad when he passed. And yeah, I'm expecting to see some other cats that I had to rehome right before I came here because Costa Rica, the last second said I couldn't bring any of them because 2 of them were too old. They were close to 20. And the other one had cancer and he could not be vaccinated. So I had to rehome all of them with a dear friend of ours who loves cats and loved these cats. Oh, number one fan, I don't want to make you cry. Not at all. But on the negative side, I want to say there's a lot of people out there that don't believe that this stuff is even possible and that will shame you into silence. I had somebody who's a close friend. Well, I consider him a friend, I guess maybe not as close as I once was, who told me once I had enough education, I would stop believing these childish things. That's the exact same thing that I heard back when I heard the choir singing in the old church, and I would hear the reverend every now and then shuffling all around. And I don't believe in that. I was talking to my buddy rabbit, Jasper. I say through these last 3 years in particular. 59, my one and only baby, 25 in New York, going to visit on the 23rd. Oh, Jasper has a lump on his head, scared. Oh, I'm so sorry. Greenworm, I am too. And the reason I started talking about this today is because I actually took my courage in hand and did something kind of a little unusual for me. We had a friend named Glenn that passed, and it was pretty awful. Glenn had a lot of unfinished business and horrible things going on. He died in his sleep, and he was in the bed for 3 days before they found him. Oh, well, everyone was shocked, and we were all at the funeral. And I'm sitting there with my husband, and Glenn appeared. And he was mad. He was big mad. Like I said, somebody that had unfinished business. He was big mad because everybody thought he committed suicide. Everybody, almost to a man. And he wanted me to tell everybody that he hadn't committed suicide. Well, I'm not stupid. I know you can't do that stuff in the middle of a funeral. If you are the praying kind, please never ask you send. I will. I'll pray for Jasper. I'll go ahead and do that. So I didn't tell anybody about Glenn except my husband. I told him immediately, and he was like, "You can't share that. That's weird." So here it is. It's 6 years later, and I finally told one of the guys. I finally said, "Look, Glenn had a heart attack in his sleep. He showed me that. He showed me exactly." Hey, silly rabbit. He showed me exactly how he died. It wasn't very painful. It was only a second or two, and he was gone. He didn't commit suicide. He didn't kill himself. He had a heart attack in the night. He's just one of those people that, yeah. I don't know about his other unfinished business. I don't know what he did about that, but he was rabid about people knowing that he hadn't killed himself. It was one of the saddest funerals I've been to in a long time. My unsolicited advice is if you have a subject important you talk about, no matter what others may think of it, do it. Your audience is here for you, not for those that opine without caring. Opine without caring. That's Twitter. That's most of Twitter. Twitter has been a really strange thing lately. I don't know why I'm watching everybody fight. I'm kind of like, why are you fighting? Why are you dying on this particular hill? I won't do that. Heck no. Heck no. Heck no. So, silly rabbit, I'm hoping that Jasper's lump on his head turns out to be nothing. You know, I've had animals that have had things like mast cell lumps, and those are mostly harmless. You take that out and they're doing fine. So I'm hoping for Jasper's sake, it's something simple. These animals, they get into your heart and way harder than humans most of the time, and they wrap themselves around you, and it's hard to say goodbye when the time comes, but sometimes you have to let them go. I had to let Little Bit go, and that was probably the most painful of all of them. I still miss Little Bit. He was pretty awesome. I don't have an account on Instagram, Twitter, any social YouTube. I heard Twitter is a dumpster fire. True? Yes. Basically, my thoughts are you take what you need and leave the rest, as they say in AA. Exactly. Exactly. And I have gotten in the last 3 or 4 months where I just have an allergy to drama. And so when people start doing that all the time, I either mute them or I block them on Twitter. And it gives you some peace of mind. It's been wonderful. The other wonderful thing is turning everything off and going out and touching the grass. I try to do that every day too. Plus, I always have 50,000 trillion projects going at once. So I've got that. Like right now, I'm trying to get all my laundry outside because dry season is finally here. I just had a lump removed on my dog. Greenworm, did they find out if it was malignant or benign, harmless? That's always the worry. That was one of the things that happened with my Siamese rescue, Pedro, is he had cancer. And it was pretty devastating. My other dog had anal gland cancer. I didn't know that was possible. Gland removed, and he's still here 4 years later. I have hope. I know. Drama on YouTube. And there's a fair amount. It's funny when creators go after each other. It's pretty crazy. And sometimes it's just really silly. At least I find it kind of silly. Like I said, I had a near-death experience in February, March, and it changed a lot of what I was thinking. And even on this stuff, and it was kind of funny because once it was over with, I was looking at one of my notebooks that I write everything down in. Like I got myself a note here. I got to go get a lab bill for something so I can go file it, because we've been at a really expensive time with the surgery that Jim had, where they took out his gallbladder and it didn't go well. So anyway, my book, I had written out exact instructions for a funeral, including what songs I wanted, and a living will where I said, I do not want X, Y, and Z. I don't want these people touching me any longer. And I just had to laugh at how ranty I was. I was really, and looking back, I had heart involvement. I had a wall of my heart that quit working. I couldn't pull oxygen out of the air. I had 105 fever. So it was the closest I've ever come. And it was one of the few times that was not asthma involved that they slapped me in the ambulance and went at like 90 miles an hour to the hospital to get me there. And they couldn't get my fever down for the longest time. So that's my story. And that's why I'm starting to not participate in drama at all, because I just can't handle it. It's just too hard on my psyche. YouTube is about all the social I can handle, even if it's even considered social. I think it is. I've had enough of my 59 years of drama. Now my life is very uneventful, thank God. Silly rabbit mine here in Costa Rica is mostly uneventful, except I have the occasional very shitty things I'm witnessing in the church communities here. Great, silly rabbit. I'm glad. I've pretty much left that community. I don't even have Twitter anymore. I may be doing the same thing myself. I'm more interested in way more different things than who's fighting with whom when. I'm contemplating doing a crochet and or art thing once a week. Dina Danzig used to do one, and I really enjoyed it. I'm going to have to step up my technical game to do that, unfortunately. I have mine written down. Cremate me, throw me in the South Branch with some daisies, and play Ripple by Grateful Dead. Green Day, mine's not too dissimilar, except that I want them to put me in the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic, somewhere in the ocean where I can be part of the ocean, which I absolutely adore. It's my happy place, the sea. And I want everybody to have a giant party with tequila and fun afterwards instead of crying, and tell all the crazy stories about me, like the time I lost my glasses down a storm drain, or the time I insulted Rod Stewart without knowing it was him. Just the crazy stories. Tell all the crazy stories. That's what I told them. I don't want them to mourn. And part of that reason why I'm even that way is because of this paranormal thing. I know there's something else out there. I just don't know what it is. And I'm of the opinion that it's kind of the great adventure you're going into when you die. The great adventure, you're moving on to something else. I don't know what that something else is, but I think it's a great adventure. I just feel it in my heart. I like positivity. I used to be a drama queen, seriously, my 20s, 30s, and 40s. It's also connected to my drinking alcohol days. That's why I'm grateful for my very uneventful, boring life. Silly rabbit. I was married to an alcoholic for a very short period of time. At least I think he was an alcoholic. And I have some hardcore alcoholics in my family of origin. Hardcore. So we don't even hardly keep it here. My husband will once in a great while have a margarita. I will every now and then hoist a tequila shot. I like it, but I'm very limited to have one because I don't need to get fallen down trashed drunk. And I don't want to kick in the alcoholic gene that's probably lurking in me too. So there you have it. And I need to learn how to crochet. I would love for you to have a party. I'll have fun. Drink, no drink. Diet Coke, please. I'm very addicted to this crap. Well, it's almost lunchtime here, and I have to hang a ton of laundry out. Tequila was my drink. I stay away now. I love tequila. I just got to say, it's so silly how much I love it. But I got to where I really liked the taste and everything. And yesterday I was in Price Mart in Liberia. I was looking at their display, their tequilas, and they have this tequila in a turquoise bottle. I mean, not turquoise, like a cobalt blue bottle I have to have. Unfortunately, it's a little bit expensive, so I didn't buy it. But may go back. I've got to go back and get a Roomba. I'm looking at sewing machines because my Bernina kicked the bucket, and I'm not driving 5 hours to get it fixed. And my singer is showing signs that it is also kicking the bucket. I danced on the tables. Oh, wow. I've been known to do some crazy things in the past like that, but I haven't danced on a tabletop or anything like that in so long. So long. And one day I'll have to tell my rock and roll stories. My first husband played music in Louisiana. And we would go backstage a lot of concerts and things. I have some observations. And it's kind of funny because one of the guys I met that I could not stand, I follow on Twitter now. We've had some interactions on Twitter and Facebook. And he is such a totally and completely different person now than what he used to be. Tequila equals tequila. Rode the floor polisher and ended up with a concussion the one time I drank that. Yeah, it will do you harm if you're not careful with it. I've seen that too. I've seen crazy things here with it. I have a high tolerance, and that is not good. I got stupid. Oh, my ex would get so stupid. I was telling somebody earlier, he would get so stupid that one time he got so stupid. He was in the bathroom. He was throwing up, of course, because you drink too much tequila, you're going to be hugging the porcelain throne. So he's there. He's not wearing a lot of clothes. He's throwing up. He's falling down drunk. And while he's throwing up, he starts crapping his pants. That's the only way to put it. Crapped his pants, knocked his head on the toilet, and passed out on the bathroom floor. And for me, that was like the beginning of the end. It was like, I'm not dealing with this anymore. I shouldn't have to deal with this. So I left him there, crapping his pants, vomit everywhere, and hitting his head on the toilet. This is like, nobody knew that I'm not cleaning you up like I usually do. It gives me something to look forward to and more positive camaraderie. I never FaceTime or Zoom, but I can learn a party of positivity. Yeah, we got to have some crazy stories. So the person I was talking about that has changed for the better and so positive is Paul Stanley of Kiss. I met him, I think it was 1977 when we went backstage when they came to our town. And he was all hair and glare, very negative vibes. Oh, it was just like, Gene Simmons smelled. Paul was very negative. The other two guys were like blasted out of their mind. So it was not a positive thing, but Paul has really turned it around. My husband died of alcohol. My son was there, and half my parents grew up in an alcoholic home, Alcoholics Infinity for me, Alcoholics Anonymous, sober since March 18th, 2012. SLA Rabbit, that's awesome. Like I said, I never dabbled much more than a drink because my mother is an alcoholic. Her father was an alcoholic. My other grandfather was an alcoholic. And a whole pile of other people are alcoholics. And so when you're a child and you're dealing with a parent that's an alcoholic, it's a pretty awful thing. Alcoholism, not college. Speak Texas. Yeah, they do that. I've had that happen to me too. It happens. So maybe we should do a stream sometime about how to recover from being around an alcoholic, because there are ways to deal with them that work and don't work. For me, when I told my ex-husband I wasn't going to help him anymore, at least cut it down. It cut down the drinking, because one of the things, when he got drunk, he would beat the living daylights out of me, unless he got so drunk he couldn't walk, like the time he hit his head. So it was the beginning of the end for me, and it was just like, no, do I really want to keep living like this? First husband was, and that's another reason I quit. Yeah, it gets to you. It gets to you after a while. Okay, you guys, I'm really going to go. I hear my husband shuffling around out there. He probably needs a nap. He's still not 100% after his surgery. Okay, it was good chat. Love you guys. Have a great day. And thank you again for the super chat, Silly Rabbit.